Hi, everyone. My name is Karolina Tuttle, and I lead the go-to-market for Supplier Relationship Management at O9. And one of the most amazing concepts that we're really focusing on that everybody wants to know about is risk management. And for that reason, I have Fred Brown with me, who's going to talk about it and gives his perspective on where things are. Fred, do you mind introducing yourself and tell us a little bit about what Resilinc does?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Fred Brown. I'm the CRO of Resilinc. We are basically a monitoring and mapping platform for supply chain risk and resiliency. So we basically monitor and map our customers and clients' supply chains to help them mitigate disruptions and events and the impact to their financials as well as their operations. We're kind of an early warning system that'll makes them aware of before things happen. They can take action and collaborate with their suppliers. Resilinc's been around for about 13 years, kind of the category creator. Our founder developed this system for Cisco Systems in-house and then took it to market shortly after that, feeling that everybody needed to commercially have these types of capabilities. I've been in the industry for 25 years around supply chain strategy, optimization, and I'm excited to share some of the perspective that we've been seeing over the last 4 or 5 years.
Thank you. So let's start with your perspective on supply chain infrastructure. What's your take on companies' robustness in handling their process, technology, and people to help with withstanding any disruptions?
Yeah, so the companies who've invested in supply chain risk tools, particularly monitoring and mapping, and down to the part site level, ingredient, raw material, um, they've, when we think about a disruption, they've really come out of those superior to their peers. But the biggest challenge continues to be lack of visibility into the sub-tier. 80% of all disruptions, which we track, happen in the lower tiers. This becomes, how would you say, very, very risky when you think about when you try to identify where the concentration of risk is. The most important thing about that is who are the players? Who are the companies and the sites that you're dealing with? And so once you map those and you have a good understanding, you can start to get some insights with that visibility around where's my risk with sole source dependencies? Where's my risk around geopolitical? Where are my risks around compliance? And the critical thing is once you get that visibility, it doesn't stop there. Now you got to collaborate and act, right? So you can put plans together with your suppliers to really think about things that you can do supplier diversification. Or when we think about revenue impact, really understand the critical parts that your supplier has and work with them to help them be more resilient. So the critical things that I think it goes without saying that change management will always be a critical part of this, right? Between the supplier. But again, when we see best in class over the last 5 years, there's consistent supplier collaboration and supply sub-tier visibility, trust but verified visibility.
Thank you. So some of your customers are here in the room. Some of them are still very early in that journey. What is your key finding in terms like what drove the strategic initiative within your client base to hop on this journey, and what are the benefits that they've seen so far, both short and long term?
Yeah, great, great. So, historically, supply chains have been designed and structured in a way where they focus on low cost and lean principles. And the more and more we leaned on those approaches, the more and more pressure we were putting on the sub tier and making them vulnerable. And so, when you think about that, you would think that there would be some aha moments, but there really wasn't. I really kind of, I think about, a couple times when I've moved and I go into a neighborhood and I see there's a couple lightning rods on a couple houses, just two in the whole neighborhood. And when I go talk to those people, they've either been hit with lightning or someone in their family's house has been hit. The people that don't, no one's ever been hit with lightning, right? So I would like to be honest with you, our key customers that started many years ago was because they had a major disruption, right? There was no more firefighting anymore. They had a disruption that impacted their business significantly, and that's really what they did. And we're talking about things like I mean, this has been going on for 10, 15 years. The floods in Taiwan in 2011. Hurricane Maria in 17 was big for some clients of ours. Of course, COVID-19 and the chip shortage. And what's interesting is, there were some winners in COVID. I know, I say that humbly, and it's a horrible situation for our society to go through. But there were companies that were impacted significantly prior to COVID, who put a comprehensive program in of mapping and monitoring with their suppliers and started collaborating, and they really capitalized on this situation. They were ready to act. Their suppliers were giving them early signals of issues, and they really capitalized on that capability and that collaboration. I'll give you a couple of examples. I'll give you a COVID-19 as well as a chip shortage. In COVID-19, we had a client who got hit pretty bad with climate-related weather 2 to 3 years before, and had a mapping program, but decided to really get strategic with it. So they were mapping about 100 of their suppliers based on spend, and they decided to really embrace best practices and look at revenue impact and really look at their suppliers. So they were able to basically map about 7,500 different parts. This is an electronics component manufacturer. And they were able to really really get strategic alignment with about 650 suppliers. So then this situation happens in Wuhan, in China. They immediately go look at their data. They see they've got significant suppliers in that region. They start collaborating. They're getting feedback of we call it impact notifications. I don't think we're going to be able to ship. Things are going to lock down. So they quickly started to collaborate with those suppliers, and basically identified that not only were significant components and parts that impacted a significant amount of their revenue were going to be impacted. But as they came into the United States, they were coming into California, which was about ready to be heavily locked down from that perspective. So they worked with that supplier, secured in the early days of COVID about 12 months of supply, and took it to a better regulated state where they could actually have access to those parts and things of that nature. They came out a big winner in those situations. Now I'll talk about the chips example. Large data center, data infrastructure manufacturer, cold rooms, racks, right? Very complex world. They started to pick up on the chip shortage early. So they immediately went to product development and really worked with the organization to say, can we design our products to rely less on these chips? Can we still bring the quality of a product and performance, but be more innovative around how we manage the chips and the power generation? They figured it out quickly, and so they did two things. Number one, they brought new products to market that were less reliant on those chips. Number two, they bought as many chips as they possibly could. Their suppliers couldn't get chips. Their suppliers were heavily reliant based on their product design on those chips. We call that weaponizing the supply chain, and they came out of that significantly ahead.
Yeah, those two stories kind of give an idea of like how much you can improve your bottom line, how much you can improve your KPIs. Very inspiring. For those that are very early in their journey, what are the key learnings from those transformations, and kind of what is your recommendation on how to explore this topic and approach it in a way that's quick and effective?
Yeah. Well, first of all, there's a common denominator. Resiliency starts with mapping and monitoring your supply chain. It really is, right? Really taking a prioritization of the parts and components of your bill of material, your ingredients, your recipes, and really looking at what impacts revenue. So, from that perspective, when you do that, it's critical that you can start to prioritize based on that. But that establishing that ongoing collaboration with those organizations to deploy plans and different strategies with them is critical. So let's talk about AI for a second, because AI is an important part of this approach. AI is a very cost-effective way to get a quick snapshot of your supply chain. It also provides a lot of irrelevant data, a large data set. It works wonderfully with what I would call verified mapping and monitoring, because it allows you to take that snapshot, really think about your critical parts and your part continuity, and really focus on those from a verification and validation, which means sending assessments to your supplier to validate that those particular components, parts, and materials are still being sourced from that site and being still fed from different suppliers. So that AI becomes a very important part of the equation from that perspective. So when we think about AI, it has to go in what we would call supplier validated mapping. So hand in hand, AI with supplier validated mapping is a very powerful tool that gives you confidence because you're only mapping the parts that are critical to your supply continuity and your revenue. But again, you're getting that snapshot across the supply chain to look at other aspects of risks, compliance, ESG, things of that nature. It's very interesting when we think about that. So when we think about, types of risk and things of that nature, that ongoing monitoring becomes critical. For the, for the, I used to offer people money, but everybody's figured it out. For the last 5 years, there's been one disruption that's been above all other disruptions. It's a factory fire, right? Very human influence, those kind of things. And so when you think about a factory fire from that perspective, we also think about the impact that it has. But also, it's interesting as we watch and we're monitoring all types of disruptions across the world right now. The two biggest ones that are emerging, number one, is bankruptcies, right? These suppliers down in the sub tier that you're critically aligned with your particular bill of material. Some of them may not even be around today. I mean, a padlock is just as powerful as COVID, right? Where you can't get in that facility from that perspective. So, and the other thing is, again, we can still continue to see it growing is climate-related impacts, weather, right? All over the globe. So here's a quick example when we talk about the impact. Um, we had a client who has had a program where they were basically measuring it by spend by supplier. And they made a pivot like the other reference client I made, where they're going to start looking at them by revenue impact and site risk and the impact to revenue by someone not being able to ship from a particular site. What they found out is that they had a very inexpensive component that they used in a couple of different categories that was tied to about 500 million in revenue. They had one supplier. So there's where you talk about again light spin but big impact, right? They immediately found budget to go reinvest to go find alternative suppliers to be able to really diversify that base. But they never had that visibility because at the time they were just looking at amount of spend. They didn't tie it back to actual categories or revenue.
Thank you. And you touched earlier upon the topic of collaboration, which I think it's one of the most challenging and rewarding things that you need to have in place to have a resilient supply chain. So from your customer base, they had to establish some level of collaboration, both externally and internally. Do you have any lessons learned from them that you can share?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, suppliers are essential to all of our success, right? I think we've all accepted that. Secondly, we've got to be able to provide value and benefit for them to collaborate, right? So I've seen it many different approaches, but it's critical that we collaborate with those suppliers where they understand the benefit to them mutually for them to be able to be transparent and confident that we can work together and continue to drive success for both sides. Risk management is really a win-win situation when you collaborate appropriately with your suppliers. Here's a perfect example. You could absolutely create what I'll call different types of assessments with them in a collaborative fashion, where again they willingly provide that information to you. We've also seen we've seen several situations where when someone understands really the supplier's inherent risk, we've had customers that have invested in fire suppression systems and actually installed them in manufacturing facilities. Um, Amazing that we've seen that. We've also seen a lot around the hurricanes where they provided hurricane readiness plans for those suppliers. The biggest one that I thought was most impressive was again understanding the criticality of the supply versus and the impact to your revenue. Putting in what we would call standards for hurricane zones, and when your supplier adheres to those, you'll actually pay a higher price for the ingredient. So they'll be rewarded to be resilient with you. So we've seen all types of approaches in that manner.
Wonderful, thank you. Last but not least, there's so many things happening with the technology. There's so many trends. What's your perspective on what's going to revolutionize our perspective on risk? Gen AI, you talk a little bit about it.
Yeah.
Do you believe it really will be so impactful with how we look at the risk? Anything else we should consider?
Yeah. Well, 100%, right? And we're seeing it, we're seeing it every day with our clients, and we're seeing it even internally, right, as we operate our business model. It's absolutely transformative today, and it will continue to be. Um, One of my wise partners that I worked for many years ago told me about a particular type of solution, and this kind of falls in that bucket. It is a solution looking for the problem, right? So we got to keep pushing the use cases and the problems in its direction, and we'll continue to see where we get big impacts, where we get little impacts, right? But one thing I do appreciate is that I do know that it's in a realm of what I would call data driven insights, right? So regardless if the impact's big or small, it still has a level of impact that we see with suppliers all the time. We're also seeing it with our customers that are adopting around their planning apps, right? So we're seeing it in demand forecasting every day as we take a multi-factor forecast and start to analyze the trends to be able to get good, great insight. We're seeing it in inventory optimization. From that perspective, we're seeing it drive a lot of carrying costs out to really giving the confidence of where your inventory positions are. We're seeing it in preventive maintenance. We're absolutely seeing it in supplier risk management. We're seeing the monitoring of all this different data and the ability to pick up on trends to give early warnings, to be able to put contingency plans and strategies and playbooks in place with your suppliers. So we're seeing data security as well, with all the supply chain data, being able to capture all that data, be able to drive insights and trends that be able to drive efficiencies for the suppliers, as well as the benefit of on time in full shipping with the end client. So we believe again, it continues to be a solution looking for the problem, and I think our job is to continue to push data at it to see what the yield is.
Thank you. Um, that's it for the questions. Thank you so much for sharing all that. I know that the topic of risk management is near and dear to all of us. Not everybody is as advanced in the journey as their client base, but a lot of us are trying to really advance in it. So thank you for your perspective. Um, and I
Hey,
appreciate you talking today.
thanks everybody.
Thank you.